There are a number of ways to turn a grayscale image into color in Photoshop, but I'm going to show you a real down and dirty way to do this. Now I have a grayscale image here, and the first thing I'm going to do is convert this to CMYK so that I can actually see the color that I'm painting. Then I'm going to grab my brush tool in my tools panel, and before I start painting, I'm actually going to create a new layer in my layers panel. And I'm going to give this a name, and I'm going to call it color. And the reason I'm calling it color is because I'm going to change this blend mode of this particular layer to color. And what that's going to do, it's going to allow us to see the underlying image when we paint color on this layer. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a color from my swatches panel, and I'm going to make sure my opacity of my brush is at 100% so I can actually see what I'm painting here. And as you can see, when I start painting, it's picking up the texture underneath on the underlying layer. And I'm just going to continue to keep painting here. I'm using the brackets on my keyboard, by the way, to increase and decrease the size of my brush. Now the trick is to make sure that this layer is set to the color blend mode, because if it's set to normal, and we'll just change that quickly so you can see, it looks like this, and this is not what we want. We want this paint to interact with the layer underneath. So I'm going to change that blend mode from normal back to color. And if we need more depth, we can always add another layer, and I'm going to call this one multiply. And I can grab either a darker version of this color or maybe even black in this case, and turn my opacity of the brush way down to, let's say, 10% or maybe even lower. And when I paint on this layer, if I change this multiply layer from normal to multiply, you can see that I can add some shadows, some really nice shadows in here. And conversely, I can add another layer and call it screen. And let's just go ahead and do that. In my layers panel, I'll add another layer called screen, and I'll change that blend mode to screen, and then I'll paint with either a lighter color, a lighter version of that color, or I'll paint with white to add some highlights. Now if the shadows and highlights are too intense, remember these are on their own layer non-destructively, so I can turn the opacity of any one of these layers down so that it's not so strong. And we could continue to select colors from our swatches panel and color this image, and that's a real down and dirty way to colorize black and white photos in Photoshop.